most of the time, we've thought of Advent perhaps as the countdown to Christmas. It's that period of time that we're getting ready for the great feast of Christmas. And so it is. There's an element of that, to be sure. But if we listen to the lessons today and actually in the days to follow, we don't hear too much about Christmas at all. In fact, in that sense, Advent is not about Christmas at all. It's about the coming of the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is come among us. In that sense, it's about Christmas. Because it was Jesus who came to live with us as one like us in all things but sin, to proclaim the coming of the kingdom and all that goes with it. That was Jesus' mission and ministry, to tell us about the kingdom of God and how it has an impact in our lives and in the world around us. When we hear the gospel lesson today and we hear about portents and signs and all of these different things, we can get all wrapped up in that and say, okay, well, when is that going to happen? And all you need to do is be in the middle of a storm in an ocean or in a hurricane with deluge of waters all around you, and you know what Jesus is talking about. And these things are indeed happening, but they're not unusual. They are actually part of the way of the world. But I think what Jesus really is talking about is that sense of becoming aware of these things, becoming aware and awake to the way the world is acting around us. Whether it's an earthquake or a flood or a great fire, these things are often beyond our control, and often things in our lives are beyond our control. But see, our hubris, our pride, our egos get in the way, and we say, well, we got to be able to control all of that. But what Jesus is teaching us is that these things will happen, and the kingdom of God will come nonetheless. Whether you like it or not, the kingdom of God is upon you, because I am here. One of the problems we have in the spiritual life, one of the biggest challenges we have, believe it or not, is simply living in the moment. Living now. Living in this place, at this time, literally, as the clock ticks. More often than not, we are concerned about the things of the past or the things of the future. Seldom are we much even aware of what's happening here and now. That's what Advent has to teach us. We can spend our whole lives worried about the future. What will happen? What's going to happen in a day or 2 or 5 or 10 or in 5 weeks or in a year or more? And we can be very anxious and fearful about such things. Or we can spend our whole lives ruminating about what's happened in the past. The slights, the hurts, the problems we've faced, the challenges maybe that we've undertaken. But seldom do we live in the moment. I'm not saying live for the moment, that's a different thing. I'm saying live in the moment. Who are we right now? Who am I right now? Truly, we are a product of our past, it's to be sure. And we need to have a vision on the future. That's what hope is all about. But the reality is that for us to really see God at work, we need to be in touch, in tune with what is happening now. That was the problem for those who would follow Jesus, who listened to his words. They were, well, when is this all going to fall down? They were worried about the future. Or they were wanting to retain or recover past glories. They were not concerned about what God was doing in their lives, even as Jesus was among them, teaching and healing and praying. That's been our problem all along. Actually, that's often the problem when we have to deal with injury and trauma in our lives. That's when we get hooked into the past. Or we're so anxious and worried about what might happen if we take a chance on this, that, or the other thing. And that's when we fear the future. But there's one thing that we hear throughout the gospel, particularly in Luke's gospel. Fear not. Fear not. But the only way we can get there is to live in the moment. Because living in the moment doesn't give us time or space to be afraid. We have to simply live. Now, we can talk about suffering. We can talk about the difficulties of life. And you see how valuable it is for that. Because, you see, we can, if we're suffering pain or trauma of some sort in our hearts or minds, even in our bodies, we can think about the past, all the things I should have done or should not have done. Or maybe it shouldn't be like that. Maybe, I want God to come down and take care of it and get rid of all of this stuff. Well, that shifts us from the past and into the future right away, doesn't it? Suddenly, we're looking for God to do something for us then, rather than simply experiencing the love and compassion that we can experience even in the midst of our difficulties right here, right now. That's the challenge for the community of faith. For we are to be a people of love. And so when someone is going through a hard time, when someone is suffering great pain, in the moment, we can turn to those around us if we are present to one another. And it is in that presence that we find the strength that we need to go through, to power through, as it were, as they talk about in modern terms, and find where we come out in the future. It may not be the future we want. It may not be the future we desire, but it will be the future we need. Because God is in the midst of it. See, when we're in the past, we're thinking about all the wonderful things God has done. When we're in the future, we're thinking of all the wonderful things God can do. In our minds, should do. But if we live in the moment, we are in relationship with God. We are encountering the Spirit of God in our midst. And we begin to see the power that is there. So Advent, while a time of expectation, getting ready for something, whether it's the first coming at Christmas or the second coming at the end of time, teaches us that we live as a people, as a great theologian, Karl Barth, once said, in the already, but the not yet. We live in a time of tension. I don't mean tension in the sense of stress, but a time when we are constantly balancing the past and the future. Constantly looking who we are and what we are today. Living every day in its fullness. To be aware of who we are and what the world is doing around us. To be aware of the power of God in the midst of all of that. To be aware, to be awake, we will hear, to how God is in our lives. That's what Advent is for. to help us recover a sense of living now, in the moment, in this place. To recover a sense of how God is around us always, never abandoning us, but always surrounding us with his compassionate embrace. To recover a sense of why Jesus came in history in the first place, to announce the kingdom of God, and that kingdom of God is with us and is ours. It's not for a future time. It's not for the past. We can worry about the past, or we can worry about whether we're going to heaven or not. It doesn't matter. Why are you worried about whether you're going to go to heaven or not? Jesus says it doesn't matter. Because God's love is all around you now. Why worry about it? Live in the moment. Live the goodness of God, the power of the kingdom now, and that's nothing you will have to ever worry about, because all it does is get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it just scoops you up and envelops you and makes you part of its fabric. That's what Advent is about. Oh, it's about baking and cooking and wrapping and buying and all those things, yes. So that we can have an expression of love on a particular day. But it's the expression of love that must be at the center. Anything else, and we've destroyed what this is about. Brothers and sisters, we are on the cusp of something new. It's not novel, but it's new. Because it's God at work in us. It's God at work in this funny little man. In all of the people around you. It's God at work in the world. Maybe not the way we want it. Maybe not the way we thought about it. But that's the future. We leave that in God's hands. We can find contentment. We can even find joy. Because when we live now, in this moment, the kingdom of God reaches into us in a way we never could imagine before. Because we finally open our eyes and see what's really real. No, it's not a perfect world. We're not there yet. No, it never was a perfect world, even in the past. And it won't be a perfect world today. But that's God's business. And he enlists you and me in the process of announcing that reality. Of turning it all over to God and living in this moment, in this time, with confident assurance that God is with us even now. That's the word Emmanuel, God with us. It's already happened, and it will continue to the end of time. So just live today. Live this moment. See God who is next to you now. See God who is near you now. See the marvelous things that God is doing in you.